Hello and welcome to the Simply Smart Business Podcast. I'm your host, Nicki Ong, and I'm so psyched to have with me today Dylan Bennett. He is the fractional CMO at his own business, DYB Media. And today we're going to be talking with Dylan about being a huge proponent of digital marketing, as am I. So we're going to talk about the benefits of digital marketing. And while traditional has its place, why digital is really awesome, a little bit about storytelling and why authenticity are major when it comes to marketing, as well as building systems, because obviously we just can't live in a world today without our systems and why that's so important. So hello and welcome, Dylan. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I always like to start off with a little story time because, we all have a journey to where we got today, and that's really important to kind of honor that and talk about how that went. And I think it's always really telling as far as how people figured out where they were meant to be. So tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to be where you are today.
So my marketing story itself is kind of where I sit now, but
Mm,
when I first got into like the job market, right? I graduated high school, I go into college, I didn't know what I wanted. So I tried a bunch of different stuff. I spent the first year of college just kind of doing a whole bunch of different stuff. Found myself in business because I knew I wanted to get into something for myself, and that kind of led me down the road of marketing. I found some big influencers, specifically Gary Vaynerchuk was a big influencer for me.
yeah.
Uh, going through college and quickly after graduating, I got a lot into marketing. After I graduated, I did a bunch of random stuff. I took photos for schools. I did sales for a printing company that I called Dunder Mifflin because that's kind of what it felt like, and never really got an opportunity to get into the marketing space until I started working for a gym. Kind of worked my way through the system. Was eventually running a gym, and then in 2020 when COVID hit, they did some shuffling of staff and put me into a position that didn't exist before, which was something I had actually suggested a year before, and that was marketing. So
Mm,
that was kind of my first step into it. And I've been doing that for the last 5 years. I've been running marketing for a series of fitness clubs in Colorado for the last 5 years. And about two or 3 years ago, I started DYB Media and have helped small businesses kind of like ours do simple marketing, mostly digital stuff, just get their name out there a little bit more. Because what I found working with the gym and just talking to some people was a lot of small businesses really struggle with where to start with digital marketing, especially with so many small businesses run by people who don't have a background in that stuff, and most of them don't even have a background in business. They just know that they're good at their thing and that's what they want.
mhm.
So really my take on that was that I wanted to help small businesses that were in a situation like the gym that needed some extra help in that area. So I took my expertise and kind of threw that out there for some other businesses, and it's been fun for the last 5 or so years doing it as a whole, and then for the last couple of years being able to help us a ton of small businesses.
Amazing. Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
incredible.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit more because I know some listeners might understand this, but others may not. And it's an up and coming term. We're hearing it a lot more, but tell us a little bit more about the fractional CMO title and what that actually entails, because I think some people are like, I think I need that, but I'm not really sure what it means.
So a lot of people are probably familiar with like the C-suite, right? The CEO, the CMO, the COO. They're familiar with the fact that they're the executive officer, they're the marketing officer, they're the financial officer, whatever it is. But a lot of small and even medium-sized businesses don't understand that maybe they need that kind of position. They need that department. So what I do is I essentially function as your CMO, but only part-time, right? I'm not a dedicated member of your team. I'm not on your payroll technically, but I function as a leader for that department. So I can help you hire staff, whether that's somebody to run your email or your social media or the entirety of your department as a lead. I can train them. We go over the metrics. I help with strategy, kind of the whole 9 yards in terms of what a normal CMO would do, but only part time. And I'm not taking out of your payroll budget. It brings an extra layer of expertise. Some of the companies that I work with, they already have a staff in place. And simply what I'm doing is helping with the strategy side of things and kind of leading that team. Because maybe the CEO or even the COO probably doesn't have an expertise or a background in marketing. So they're trying to learn on the fly just like the team is. So
Yeah.
by bringing in a CMO like myself, that gives them somebody that can lead that team with an area of expertise or some actual background in it.
Yeah, and that's huge for small businesses that can't bring on someone full time, or especially someone with that amount of expertise full time, because that's a big lift for a lot of businesses. So you get the benefit of the expertise plus somebody that can just handle that for you so that you don't have to stress about it. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. And let's shift into digital marketing because this is near and dear to my heart too. I always tell small business owners that traditional is great. There's something to be said for TV and radio and even billboards sometimes, but digital marketing is really where it's at. So tell us a little more about your take on that.
You know, digital marketing lends itself a lot more to actionable metrics, right? So with things like social media, with SEO, with hey, sorry, make sure I got that turned down. So with digital marketing, it really lends itself to metrics, and it's very actionable metrics. With things like TV and billboards, it's hard to track, right? It's hard to really
Mhm.
get an ROI. Even if you throw a QR code on there or a specific landing page, it does get harder to see, okay, how many people are viewing my ad, how many people is it actually connecting with. Obviously, if you've got like a specific landing page which does lean back into digital, you can see like, okay, how many people are actually visiting my site from that. But then from there, like everything before that, you have no idea. And all the metrics that you're getting can be really skewed. They can look a little fluffed. But with digital media, you post something on Instagram or YouTube, you're seeing exactly how many people saw it. You're seeing exactly how many people clicked on your profile. You're seeing exactly how many people clicked from your profile to your web page. I mean, you can see every single step. And there's a lot more at bats too, right? You can start an Instagram or a YouTube account for free today. You could technically go put together a website for little or no money. You can put together a Google listing for free, and it's all really easy for small businesses to get into. There's just the knowledge component, right? So
Mhm.
so what you're paying is knowledge. You're paying in the time that it takes to learn the skill or to hire somebody to teach you the skill.
Great point.
That's a big part of what I love about digital is that A, it's actionable, B, it's easier, right? There's a smaller barrier of entry, and three, the only real cost is your time and how to learn how to do it.
Absolutely. I also love that you can repurpose a lot of things too. I'm
Yes.
the queen of repurposing. I think that
Mhm.
it's fantastic, and you can't really do that as well with traditional media, unfortunately.
A lot of traditional media, it's funny. My wife and I were watching all the new trailers and stuff from the Netflix
Mm.
experience this weekend. So, we were big Stranger Things fans, and so we're excited for that to come out. So, but it's interesting to watch it on different mediums because it's all the same commercial or the same preview, but now they're just formatting it differently for whatever kind of screen it's on. Digital media, I mean, you could have a podcast like yourself or like mine, and you can take clips from that podcast and share it on other platforms, and then
Hmm.
you can put it on your blog. You can send it out in an email newsletter. I mean, there's 10 different layers that you can take from just one thing, and that really kind of boosts your level of effort as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why? I'm a big proponent for working smarter, not harder. So if we can
Mhm.
use the same piece of content in multiple places, it's something, just as an aside, a pushback I've gotten over the years from clients is, well, I don't want to inundate people with the same content. And it's like, well, it's actually a good thing because it takes so many touch points for someone to become
Mhm.
a customer now. I mean, I've heard as high as it used to be 7, and I've heard as high as 13 touch points before someone is actually interested in becoming a customer. And with digital, you just, like you said, you can get there so much quicker, and it's ultimately cheaper, I think.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, you want to have more time in front of your ideal customer, right? Because think of yourself as a customer, like buying something that's $100, right? You're not going to do it after 5 seconds of being with
Hmm.
somebody or after a 30-second video more often than
Yeah.
not. It's going to take some repetition. So if you've got a longer piece of content, that that number of pieces of content is going to be less, right? They can spend 5 episodes of an hour long podcast with you, or they can spend 60 times that on 1 minute videos on Instagram. So if you can repurpose those, if you can use, your systems like what we'll talk about here shortly, if you can use some systems to repurpose that and post all of that stuff in different places, and give them more opportunities to spend more time with you, that trust is just going to go up. That ability to communicate with them is gonna go up too.
Yeah. And speaking of trust, I think that plays well into the storytelling and authenticity piece because that all builds trust as well. So talk a little bit on that and how you work with your clients to build those stories and more authenticity for their clients.
I mean, storytelling is like the original form of marketing, right? When our
Oh.
ancestors used to try and get more people into their tribes or try and push their hunters to go to certain fields, like they told stories like this is how our mind works and how
Hmm.
our body functions. So being able to tell a story and having somebody connect with some part of that story, it doesn't have to always be the whole thing, but being able to connect your audience to some kind of story. You look at some of the best Super Bowl ads over the last few years. The most memorable ones are the ones that tell a story and that get you connected some way emotionally. And so if you can play that in some of your content and your if you're doing some TV stuff, if you're doing commercials, if you can do that in your commercials, that's a great way to do it. But even in simple things like small form video, carousel posts on Instagram, email newsletters, blog posts, like telling some kind of story really makes that whole piece of content really connect. And I
Hmm.
think that's a huge part of it. In terms of authenticity, obviously you want to tell stories that are connected to you, right? They're authentic,
Sure.
they're real. You're not just going to ChatGPT and like, hey, give me a story on how to do this. You want to make sure that it's really something that you can speak on. Because if you get asked about it later, you're going to have to recall it. And if it's not your story, if it's not authentic, then that's going to be pretty hard. And that lends itself into the trust factor too.
Hmm.
You want to be as authentic as possible. And even though there's things like AI and there's content creators out the wazoo today, people can feel that on authenticity. They can feel that true storytelling, that real knowledge that comes from experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And on that, because we end up talking a lot about AI here on the podcast, I'm curious, and I know this is sort of off the cuff, but I'm curious your thoughts on it because it's something that's still so concerning for so many people and has people kind of nervous. And I know over the years clients have said, well, I can just create content there and yeah, you can. But I'm interested in your thoughts on it.
I see it more as an aid than anything. A lot of people that I talk to that are scared of it or that are intimidated by it, they just don't know enough about it yet. And I think that's the same with any new technology. I mean, you look back at the iPhone and people are like, "Yeah, I'm not using that. It doesn't have any buttons, right?" They use the
Mhm.
BlackBerry, but I don't know a single person that uses the BlackBerry today. So,
No.
or even technically a phone with a button. I haven't seen a phone with anything
Yeah.
other than side volume buttons in years. But I think like just spending a little bit of time trying to educate yourself about AI is huge. In your example of I could just use AI to do what you're doing. Yes, but I
Right.
mean you can, but so is everybody else.
Hmm.
The real creativity comes from the mind, right? It comes from the human. So if you can
Absolutely.
find somebody who can utilize AI maybe for ideas or for structure or just a basic outline on how to put
Hmm.
something together and then they can transform it. You can do that in your content, right? You can use it to maybe give yourself a first script of an email newsletter, right? And then you go through it, you change it into your own words, you restructure it maybe a little bit differently and make it more unique. That AI just acted as an aid. And
Right.
that's what I use it for, is I use it as an aid. I use it to help me edit my videos and do some small stuff like that. But the overall creative has to come from you because that's where that authenticity comes from.
Absolutely. Well said. And I couldn't agree more. I always say that it's a tool and it's great for those sort of lower thinking tasks that you don't want to bog your own brain down with, like scheduling or the idea of the structure or coming up with brainstorming ideas, things like that. But it always needs a heavy hand editing because people can smell AI writing from a mile away now and they know exactly what it
Mhm.
looks like. They will brush right past it and go on to the next thing very quickly.
100%, 100%. And like AI is just going to get better, but so can we. We
Yep.
can still learn those skills. We can learn how to use AI to help us.
Hmm.
And if that is something that you want to use in your marketing, do it like a tool, right? Don't just lean on that. Don't be like, okay, write me an email newsletter. Here's the topic. Here's the four things that I want in there. and then just copy
Copy
and paste
paste.
into your email platform and a MailChimp or whatever you're using, and then send it out. Like it has to
Hmm.
come from you. You can use it as like a starting point, but then okay, I got to put some meat from me back into this thing to make it more authentic.
Absolutely. And the other thing I noticed with it is that having a marketing background is really important with these tools because the output is only as good as the input. So if you give it very little information, it's going to give you a lot of fluff back. But if you really feed it and nurture it and teach it about your business, about what you're trying to do, goals with goals in mind, the right calls to action, things like that, then it can spout out some really great stuff, but it still needs that human heart and human head behind it.
100%. And I think kind of what lends into that is just like I see marketing as communication. We kind of touched on that
Mm,
with the storytelling, but marketing
yeah.
is just communicating what you want to somebody else, right? And that's what
Yep.
sales is too, essentially. But and you want to do the same thing with using AI for your marketing is you need to be able to communicate what you want it to do, how you want it to do it, the background. So being able to communicate that stuff first to the AI will help you learn the skills of communication to get it better out to your customers.
Absolutely. Very well said. And so, on that note, sort of taking AI to the next level, let's talk building systems because I'm really excited about this topic with you. And especially as you are someone, and I know many of our listeners are too, that works a 9 to 5 as well as running your own business and is kind of maybe making that transition or just really passionate about both things. It's hard to do all the things. And you have a young growing family, I know, with 2 little boys, one on the way. So there's a lot to that and that balance. So talk to us a little bit about what systems you're building, what's worked, what hasn't, or anything you're willing to share.
Yeah, I mean, systems have been huge. I mean, working a 9 to 5, like you said, I've got a second kiddo on the way. First one's 5, and he keeps me busy on his own. So I can't
Mm,
imagine what a second one's going to do to that. But yeah, systems is a lot of it. It's especially if you're a business owner and you don't have expertise in marketing or you don't have somebody that you can hire immediately in to do some marketing stuff, and you're trying to do this on your own, it can feel like a second job. I'm trying to, market your business, put out content, and then still service your customers, right? Whether that's with products or services, it takes a whole nother person essentially. So having the right systems in place is huge. So, we kind of touched on it earlier with repurposing content. That's a huge one. I have a full-blown system on how I repurpose my content. I
nice.
start at the top either with an email newsletter or typically a podcast episode. And then that topic turns into everything else, right? That podcast episode turns into an email newsletter. It turns into a blog on my
Hmm.
website. It turns into typically anywhere from 5 to 15 pieces of content on my other platforms like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, kind of across the spectrum. That one topic turns into, almost 30 pieces of content every week
Hmm.
just because of repurposing. So having systems in place on how I can, okay, rewrite that caption, turn that one, 10 to 20 minute podcast into all of these things is
Hmm.
super important. Um, I mentioned earlier I use some AI stuff for video editing.
Hmm.
I use a program called Descript. I also use another program called Opus Clip, and both of them are very good. Descript I use for the longer form stuff. You can set up systems in terms of how you edit, how like the captions come through, so you don't have to set those settings every single time.
Mm.
You get it to where you want it. You click that setting, and then okay, it's pretty much set up with the lighting and the captions, and any B-roll content can be automated too. So that's a huge help. Gosh, what are some other ones? I mean, I feel like my whole life is a system. It's kind of tough to think about one.
To
You
go
know, my
back and break everything down again.
yeah,
Yeah.
my calendar's a huge one. That was a big project, 3 or 4 years ago that I really, I was like, man, and this was even before I started my business, just trying to organize everything, right? Because I didn't want to take time away from my family to do my job, and even working for the gyms, which I still do in my 9 to 5. I'm managing 3 locations, so spending time in each location. It's getting videos done for each location. It's making content. It's doing
Mm.
emails. So I do a lot of time blocking, and that's a really big one for me, especially now. A lot of my calendar has baby appointments and
Mm.
doctor's appointments and stuff like that. Doing checkups on baby coming this month. So
Yeah.
So those kind of things kind of get integrated, and then you work around that, right? So that's probably my biggest system, is just managing your time. Because if you can manage your time, everything else becomes a lot easier.
Well
Um,
said.
and I'm a big proponent of, if it's not on the calendar, it's not going to happen. You can have a
Hmm.
to-do list that's 30 things long, but if it's not on the calendar, it's not going to happen at all.
And I love time blocking myself, and I find that it's a really nice way to take everything that's in my brain and just get it out so that it's not constantly swirling, and then I'm left with the anxiety of what am I forgetting because it has to be something.
Mhm.
And it's just so helpful to be able to look at the calendar and know what you have going on. You don't have to think about it. You're not wasting those extra moments with trying to decide which task is most important because you've already planned it out.
100%. I mean, the most productive days always start the night before, right? Or even the Sunday before.
Very true.
Biggest tasks I always put on the calendar at least Sunday before. I'll review anything that I put on my calendar the week before, and see if that's still going to move me forward and help me out, or help my business or my family, whatever the
Yeah.
objective is. And then you build in the small stuff around it, because there is still the small to-dos. You still have to pay your bills. You still have to
Mhm.
do the small things. But if you can focus that your time around the big things and then work in the small stuff around that, then things usually tend to move forward pretty quickly.
Yeah, very well said. I love that. And this conversation has been so insightful. So thank you, Dylan, for all the tidbits and amazing information. Thank you. What is the best way for our listeners to connect with you online?
The two most active platforms that I'm on right now are LinkedIn and Instagram. Instagram,
Okay.
it's the _DY Bennett, Bennett. And then you can just search my name, Dylan Bennett, on LinkedIn. Those are the two most active ones, but you can also check out the website, dybmedia.org, and you can see all the stuff that we're currently doing. We've got a couple of small digital products that are helping some small businesses out as well. I
Awesome.
just launched a marketing jumpstart kit that kind of helps either first-time business owners or early stage business owners kind of get their marketing off the ground, and maybe a couple places to start, some content ideas, things like that. So yeah.
Incredible. That's very cool. And I'll definitely include all the links in the show notes so listeners can get right there and connect with you
Awesome.
and get those amazing products. That sounds incredible. Yeah, of course. Do you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
One thing I always end both my newsletters and my podcast episodes with is take everything one rep at a time. Obviously,
Mm,
coming from a gym, reps are repetitions that get you stronger. I think about the same thing when it comes to learning and doing business, is that there's so many things to learn, there's so many reps to take, but you can only take one thing at a time. So as you're growing in your marketing, as you're growing in your business, take everything one step at a time and make sure you do that one rep as best as you can.
mm, very well said. Well, Dylan, it's been incredible having you here. Thank you so much again for joining us. And to our amazing listeners, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the Simply Smart Business podcast for more inspiring conversations and actionable strategies to help you grow your business. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.